On July 29, 2005, Hamdi Adus Issac was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, possession of explosives, and conspiracy to cause explosions that would threaten life. He was sentenced to a minimum of 40 years in prison in the UK. He and 5 others attempted to detonate homemade explosives across London. Luckily, all the bombs failed and did not explode. This heinous act of terror occurred just 2 weeks after the tragic 7/7 bombing that ended the lives of 52 innocent civilians and injured over 770 others. The news of Hamdi's crime came as a shock to those who knew him. His friends from high school used to call him Bambi. His big dark eyes, long eyelashes, and gentle personality earned him the nickname. His brother in Toronto said he was just a family man. So, what went wrong? Why did Hamdi attempt to commit such a violent attack? Why did he try to end his own life and the lives of countless innocent people? This is the story of Hamdi Adus Issac.
And it goes a little something like
Ethiopia, 1978. Let's start at the very beginning. In 1978, Hamdi was born in a small city called Harar in Ethiopia. The city's residents are diverse, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious. Hamdi was raised in a Muslim household. Traditionally, the version of Islam followed by Muslims in this part of the world is moderate Sunni with Sufi influences. Because of this moderate version of Islam practiced in the city, the Muslims exist peacefully. A typical upbringing for a Muslim child in Harar is to attend Islamic classes from a very young age, around 3 or 4 years old. The expectation is that studies would be completed between the ages of 10 to 12. During Hamdi's childhood in Ethiopia, he studied English. Hamdi grew up during a politically unstable time in Ethiopia's history. In 1974, the country's government was overthrown by a socialist regime called the Derg. The new government's policies brought significant hardships to many. This prompted people to flee the country in hopes of a better future elsewhere. Hamdi's 2 older brothers, Ramzi and Fathi, left the country and immigrated to Italy. In 1992, when Hamdi was about 14 years old, he and his brothers Abdullahi and Wahib left Ethiopia. They joined their brothers already settled in Italy. 1992. The 5 brothers first lived in a small Italian town called Colleferro. The men tried to make money any way they could. It is reported that either Hamdi or one of his brothers made extra cash by selling plastic lighters in shops and bars. After a few years, they moved to the big city, Rome. Hamdi attended high school there. Descriptions of Hamdi by old friends suggest he was just an average teenager. He hung out with friends after school, drank beer, and danced at the local disco. His friends noted he was a very good dancer. He dated girls and was known as an enthusiastic ladies' man. While Hamdi's new home was Italy, he was obsessed with America. In the 1990s, hip-hop culture and music was in its golden age. Hamdi idolized a popular rapper at the time, Tupac Shakur.
Back to get wrecked. All respect to those who break their neck to keep their hopes in check, cause though they sweat a brother majorly.
As a tribute to the rappers they admired, Hamdi and his friends added the letter G to the end of their names. Hamdi's fashion sense was influenced by hip-hop too. He wore basketball jerseys and let his pants hang low with a dropped crotch. While Hamdi loved rap music and fashion, he wasn't a fan of violence. When fights broke out at his high school, he would step in and make peace. Hamdi's teenage experiences are considered normal in many cultures. However, because he drank, danced, and dated girls, his lifestyle would be considered sinful according to most interpretations of Islam. The focus of Islam is to please Allah and submit to His will. Hamdi was not living a life submitted to Allah. Hamdi's Italian friends reported he only abstained from eating pork. Hamdi didn't talk about Islam with his non-Muslim friends in Italy. However, he did say he believed in God. In 1996, Tupac Shakur was killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles.
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business. He was 25.
Hamdi's idol was dead. That same year, Hamdi would turn 18 years old. He decided to leave Italy and move to London by himself. England, 1996. Upon arriving in London, Hamdi changed his name from Hamdi Adus Issac to Hussain Osman. He lied and said he was a Somali citizen in hopes it would help him gain asylum, refugee status, and economic assistance more easily. While in London, Hamdi's Italian friends and ex-girlfriend kept in contact with him. Hamdi visited them in Italy during holidays, and they would visit him in London. Hamdi soon started a family. He married a woman named Yeshimabet Girma, a daughter of an Ethiopian diplomat. She was raised as a Christian, but converted to Islam in London. The couple had 3 children together. Hamdi became more religious. Even his Italian friends who kept in contact with him reported they noticed a change in his behavior. They said Hamdi forced his partner to wear the hijab. Hamdi's neighbors described him as a muscular man who always wore thobes. Hamdi even wore his thobes while he rode his bike. These are long garments traditionally worn in the Middle East. How Hamdi now dressed was a dramatic change from the basketball jerseys and baggy pants of his teenage years. Hamdi's religious shift did not happen in isolation. He is reported to have regularly attended the Finsbury Park Mosque in South London. This mosque has a reputation of extremism. Notably, it is a significant distance away from Hamdi's apartment. Ever since the 1990s, the Finsbury Mosque and its leader, Abu Hamza, were on the radar of London's police. When the police visited, they saw illegal activities occurring in plain sight. Fake passports and fake credit cards were being exchanged. Young boys were sitting in a room watching videotapes of jihad, graphic images of Muslims beheading non-Muslims. Abu Hamza was using the mosque to recruit boys to join Al-Qaeda. Eventually, Abu Hamza was arrested. However, by that point, many boys and men were already radicalized and ready to commit violent acts of terror. Muslim leaders at a mosque in Stockwell reported Hamdi, along with other extremists, were known for their attempt to take over their mosque. Hamdi attended Islamist meetings at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. There, he engaged in long and aggressive debates with the crowds about Islam. By early 2004, Hamdi became acquainted with 2 men, also of East African origin, Mukhtar Ibrahim and Yassin Omar. Hamdi, Mukhtar, and Yassin were all unemployed. They supported themselves by collecting welfare from the government. Both Hamdi and Mukhtar were collecting welfare under multiple identities. In the spring of 2004, Hamdi attended a camping trip in the Lake District of northwest London. A police officer who happened to observe the campers took photographs of them running around in what appeared to be a suspiciously organized way. July 21, 2005. On July 21, 2005, Hamdi entered the London transit system at Shepherd's Bush Station. He entered a busy train packed with commuters. Those around him didn't know it yet, but Hamdi had a secret. Hamdi was wearing a rucksack containing a homemade bomb. He reached into his backpack and tried to detonate the explosive. Smoke filled the air. The device failed. Realizing the bomb didn't work as he hoped, Hamdi got flustered. Everyone on board the train panicked. Hamdi then escaped between 2 carriages and casually walked along the tracks in an above-ground section of the subway line. A man saw Hamdi walking on the tracks and shouted for him multiple times to get back on the platform. Hamdi did not pay attention to the man and calmly continued walking. Hamdi then traveled down a 5-meter wall and trespassed into a residential garden. He climbed into the home's dining room window and rushed through the home. He then encountered the homeowner. He told her he wasn't going to hurt her and then walked out the front door.
"I won't hurt you. I'm just passing through."
Hamdi reportedly ran into a woman wearing Islamic clothing and demanded that she take him home. When the woman refused, Hamdi reportedly chastised her for not helping another Muslim in need. About half an hour after the failed plot, Hamdi made a call to his wife to arrange for her to pick him up. Hamdi's wife and brother-in-law would pick him up and drive to Brighton to hide him at his sister-in-law's house. He took a bus and was captured on CCTV. Police identified him from the image and initiated a search. That same day, 5 other men attempted to detonate explosives in London. In all 6 incidents, the bombs failed to explode. The incidents prompted a massive manhunt for the failed suicide bombers. A total of 6,000 police officers were drafted in from across the country to help with the search. In the police's search for Hamdi, they investigated his belongings left at the crime scene. Inside his rucksack was a ripped photo of him and his wife. There was also a gym membership card with his name and photo. The police then headed to the gym. The staff at the gym were surprised one of their members was involved in the crime. They reported Hamdi seemed like a polite and pleasant man. The staff knew him by name and never noticed anything unusual about him. The staff provided Hamdi's address to the police. At Hamdi's home, the police found evidence of extremist material. They found recordings of speeches by preachers involved in radicalization and instructions for how to make a suicide bomb vest. Sadly, in the police's effort to hunt down Hamdi, They misidentified him as a Brazilian man named John Charles de Menezes. John Charles was fatally shot by the police. Meanwhile, the police were still searching for 5 other suspects: Mukhtar Saeed Ibrahim, Ramzi Muhammad, Yassin Omar, Manfo Kwaku Isiidu, and Wahhabi Muhammad. At an address associated with Yassin Omar, police found materials that could be used to make explosive devices. The kitchen had visible signs of corrosive damage, which suggested it was used to make bombs. The home also had videotapes that contained violent preaching by the extremist Muslim leader Abu Hamza from the Finsbury Park Mosque. Yassin was the first to be located and arrested. He had fled London by traveling in a burqa. Mukhtar Ibrahim and Ramzi Muhammad were then found at the same location in London and arrested. Police learned Hamdi had left London. On July 26th, he had taken a Eurostar train to Paris, France using a fake passport. He then made his way to Italy. The police in both the UK and Italy tracked Hamdi's cell phone signals to his older brother's house in Italy. The Italian police caught Hamdi and arrested him on July 29, 2005. This was 8 days after the failed attack. Just prior to his arrest, it was discovered that he made a phone call to Saudi Arabia. In Italy, Hamdi was held at the Regina Coeli prison in central Rome. Over 3,000 miles away in Canada, Huda Mukbil was diligently working for CSIS. CSIS stands for Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Huda is the first African Arab Canadian Muslim woman to join CSIS. Huda, like Hamdi, is originally from Ethiopia. She was born just 2 years before Hamdi in 1976. Huda's mother is from Harar, the same city as Hamdi. Huda's father is from Yemen. Huda's family lived in a city called Dire Dawa. In the late 1970s, they fled Ethiopia because of the war and political situation that evolved under the Derg regime. It was this same unstable environment that prompted Hamdi's 2 older brothers, Ramzi and Fathi, to leave the country and settle in Italy. Huda's family first flew to Djibouti and then relocated to Egypt. From Egypt, her family later settled in Canada. Huda Mukbil was recruited to help in the 21/7 London bombing case because she could speak multiple languages. The East African suspects spoke many languages that Huda was familiar with: Oromo, Amharic, Somali, Tigrinya, Arabic, and Harari. Huda possessed a rare skill that no other intelligence officer had. She could speak the Harari language. Huda was tasked with translating Hamdi's conversations from Harari to English. Her job was to determine how he became a terrorist, who his support network was, who was involved with him, how and why he went to Rome, whether his arrested brother also knew about the attacks, whether they supported him, and whether another terrorist support network existed in Italy. The information was important because it could be used to help hold Hamdi accountable, prevent another potential attack, and determine the extent of his terrorist network. Huda wrote a report that was provided to the London Police Services. The report detailed how he was radicalized, how he and others planned the operation, and how his friends and family helped him flee the country. The report was to be used in questioning Hamdi, the other suspects, and for Hamdi's extradition to the UK. Hamdi was soon extradited to the UK and placed in custody with the London police.
The Constitution Court rejected the application sent by Mr. Hamdi, and they confirmed the judgment issued by the Court of Appeal on the 17th August and decided to extradite him straight away. There are no other appeals against this decision, and this decision will be enforced within the next 10 days.
Hamdi's trial started in January 2007. Instead of wearing a suit, Hamdi wore casual clothes with designer labels. Hamdi is documented as behaving erratically. He once stood up and started ranting and raving. He was once escorted out of the courtroom and the trial continued without him. Hamdi tried to avoid being held accountable for his crime. He claimed he was passionate about social justice and participated in peace marches against the war in Iraq. He claimed the bombs were just meant to scare people and bring attention to the injustices of the war. He claimed he didn't plan on killing anyone. However, when the judge questioned him about his escape plan, he was not able to provide any details. The judge concluded Hamdi had indeed planned to die on the train. Once Hamdi realized the judge was not believing him, he came up with a new lie. He now claimed another one of the suspects, Mukhtar Ibrahim, was the mastermind behind the attacks, and he was the victim. Hamdi claimed he was forced to make bombs and carry out the plan. Again, the jury did not believe Hamdi's lie. Hamdi also claimed his group was not working for Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is the same Islamic terrorist organization behind the 9/11 terrorist attack on September 11, 2001. This group is responsible for numerous atrocities worldwide. Again, Hamdi lied about his connection to this group. The police in London learned that one of the suspects, Mukhtar, traveled frequently to Pakistan. He was there at the same time as the convicted 7/7 bombers. It was determined that both the failed bombings on 21/7 and the 7/7 bombings were operating from the same Al-Qaeda network from Pakistan. The terror group in Pakistan wanted to attack the people of London. Instead of attacking the UK from abroad, they radicalized Muslims already living in London. They convinced the local Muslims to carry out the violent attacks on their own communities.
And of course, the big question is, how credible is that appeal?
Right. Well, the 21/7 bombers appealed about a year after they were convicted, and it was struck out. They didn't last. This one's credibility relies on this chap, Sean Doyle. And Sean Doyle was a key player at the Forensic Explosives Laboratory in the run-up to this trial. Both he and his team, as he says in his statement, provided most of the explosives-related scientific evidence at that trial. And he was the one that cast doubt on another expert that the prosecution chose to use. So he's now coming forward, some many years later, having felt troubled by the whole thing and saying, look, things were not right. This raises very, very serious concerns about the validity of that scientific evidence at the time.
Two of Hamdi's brothers, Ramzi and Fathi, were also arrested and sent to jail. This was for their involvement in Hamdi's escape from the crime scene. Ramzi was also arrested on charges of possessing false documents. In Rome, Ramzi was the owner of an internet cafe and phone calling center. Hamdi's brother Fathi was charged with destroying documents the investigators were looking for. Hamdi's wife, Yeshimibet Girma, was taken to trial for her involvement in the crime. After the attack, the police had followed clues that led them to Hamdi's home. The door was opened by Yeshimibet. She lied to the police. She provided them with an incorrect name and cell phone number for her husband and said the couple were estranged. She was charged with failure to inform the police of her husband's plan to carry out the attack. She assisted him escape from the crime scene and removed and destroyed evidence from her home. She took audio tapes with extremist material across London and left it with a man named Muhyiddin Ali. Muhyiddin was one of the 5 men convicted of helping the failed bombers. Disturbingly, during the trial, Yeshimibet admitted she was aware Hamdi took their son to a terrorism training camp in the Cumbria area of England. This was where Hamdi met 4 out of the 5 other men involved in the 21/7 plot. Yeshimibet claimed she didn't live with Hamdi. She said he just visited whenever he felt like it, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. Yeshimibet Girma was sentenced to 15 years in prison. After an appeal, her sentence was reduced to 11 years. She was convicted of having information about terrorism and failing to disclose it without reasonable excuse and assisting an offender. Yeshimibet's brother Isaias, her sister Mulumebet, and her boyfriend Muhammad Kabashi were all convicted of assisting Hamdi after the attempted attack. When Hamdi fled the crime scene, he was first taken to Mulumebet's home. She treated his injuries and disposed of his clothes, destroying critical forensic evidence. The next day, Mulumebet texted her sister who was in London.
Hi babes, hope you're all right. We are cool and slept well, thank God. Call you later babes. Love you all. X.
They soon moved Hamdi to Mulumebet's boyfriend's apartment. Muhammad Kabashi lived with 2 roommates, Shadi Abdel Gadir and Omar Al-Maghboul. All 3 were charged with withholding information from the police and sentenced to 6 months in jail. Mulumebet was sentenced to 10 years in prison. After an appeal, her sentence was reduced to 5 years. Her brother Isaias' sentence was also reduced after an appeal. The 3 siblings, Yeshimibet, Mulumebet, and Isaias, were awarded a total of $4.5 million in legal aid and used the money to reduce their prison sentences and prevent attempts of deportation to Ethiopia. The one question that no one has answered is, why? Neither the Netflix series, Attack on London, nor Huda Mukbil's book, Agent of Change, even attempted to explain why Hamdi and the other men did what they did. How could Hamdi, a man who was raised in a peaceful, moderate Muslim community in Ethiopia, turn into a radical Islamic terrorist after moving to London? In Italy, Hamdi was barely following the tenets of his religion. He was living like every other teenager there. And he was in love with American culture. So why did everything change when he moved to London? What compelled him to incorporate Islam more and more into his life? While we can't say for certain what was going on in Hamdi's head, we can speculate. Hamdi was 18 years old when he moved from Italy to London. He immigrated alone. In search of a community and a place to belong, the young Muslim naturally went to the mosque. He was now part of the large Muslim community in London. He may have listened to lectures in mosques warning against sin and the extreme punishments in the afterlife. At Finsbury Park Mosque, Hamdi may have heard violent preaching encouraging jihad and other illegal activities. Hamdi was no stranger to illegal activities. He used a fake passport to enter London. And, not to mention, his older brother Rumzi was arrested on charges of possessing fraudulent documents. Hamdi may have started to feel ashamed and guilty of the sins he committed in Italy. He may have felt afraid of the possibility of punishment from Allah. Driven by fear and a desire to repent from his sins, he may have decided to become more religious. To avoid the sin of premarital sex, Hamdi got married when he was young. He married a Muslim convert, Yeshimebet. Soon, Hamdi became a young father to 3 children. But Hamdi didn't get a job to support his family. Instead, he supported his family by collecting welfare from the government using multiple identities. Hamdi prioritized his religion over everything else. Instead of working, he spent his time engaging in aggressive debates about Islam in Speaker's Corner. His religious zeal grew to the point where he and others tried to take over another mosque. They wanted to spread their interpretation of Islam. Hamdi didn't just want to live his life as a better Muslim. He wanted others to understand Islam the way he did. Hamdi also wanted his public image to match his commitment to Islam. So, he ditched his old basketball jerseys and baggy pants from high school and started only wearing thobes. Islam impacted every part of Hamdi's life. His priorities, who and when he married, his sex life, how he spent his time, who he associated with, and how he dressed. This is because Islam is not simply a religion in a spiritual sense. It is a complete way of life that governs what one should and shouldn't do. Islam uses a complex system of rewards and punishments that regulates the actions of Muslims. This system operates both in real life and in the Islamic afterlife. From a very young age, Muslims are scared into submission. They are taught they could burn in eternal hellfire and be punished in their graves if they are sinful and not forgiven by Allah. Muslims can only avoid these punishments by refraining from sins and being granted forgiveness from Allah. However, there is one way Muslim men can almost guarantee forgiveness and thus avoid punishment. This is through fighting for the cause of Allah and dying as a martyr, called a shaheed in Islam. Fighting for the cause of Allah is a type of jihad. According to Hadith, a martyr is forgiven from the moment his blood is spilled. These martyrs are not only forgiven, they are also promised many rewards in Islam's afterlife. Hamdi's convert wife knew about these rewards. After Yeshimebet's arrest, detectives found a note in her handwriting. The note detailed the heavenly rewards waiting for her martyr husband. The Quran and Hadith provide many detailed descriptions of these promised rewards waiting for martyrs. Some of these rewards include a seat in paradise, protection against the punishment of the grave, a crown with 1 ruby that is worth more than the entire world and its contents, the ability to intercede for 70 of his relatives, and 72 heavenly feminine spouses. These 72 spouses are described in detail in Islamic holy texts. They are described as young, white virgins with modest gazes, wide, dark eyes, big breasts, delicious front passages, and were never touched by any man or jinn. The martyrs who obtain these feminine beings are said to be rewarded with never-ending erections. Did Hamdi think he was beyond forgiveness from Allah? Did he fear his sinful past was putting him at risk of burning in hell forever? Did he think the only way he could save himself was by fighting the non-Muslims of London? Many other suicide bombers who acted before and after him also committed many sins. These sins vary widely from alcohol consumption, dealing and doing drugs, premarital sex, pregnancy out of wedlock, being rape victims, and being transsexual. Some of these men and women, like Hamdi, also became increasingly religious before committing the act of terror. Because Islam provides this option to erase one's sins through violence, it is appealing to those who believe they have unforgivable sins. Alternatively, was Hamdi driven by his lust for women? Was the offer of 72 virgins in paradise and never-ending erections too good to pass down? The Quran's multiple verses that describe Muslims fighting against non-Muslims encourages an us versus them mentality. This mentality can cause Muslims to divide all people into two groups, the moral and superior Muslims and the immoral and inferior non-Muslims. Hamdi had this mentality. When he was escaping from the crime scene and bumped into a random woman he believed was Muslim, he demanded she take him home. This is because, although Hamdi did not personally know this woman, he saw her as part of his in-group. To him, she was Muslim, and Muslims helped each other. The belief that Muslims should help other Muslims comes from the Quran and Hadith. When the woman refused to help Hamdi, he became angry because this violated his expectation of how the woman should behave. In his perspective, she wasn't living up to her duty of helping Muslims. This is why Hamdi felt justified in chastising her for not helping another Muslim in need. This us versus them mindset is also captured in a witness description of Rumzi's failed attack on the transit system. The witness, Angus Campbell, was a firefighter who was riding the train to go to work. When the explosive failed to detonate, there was a loud bang sound. White smoke filled the air. Rumzi screamed. At this point, the passengers did not know what was happening. Angus saw Rumzi was scared and thought he was in pain and needed help. So, naturally, the kind man asked if Rumzi needed help. This gesture was not welcomed by Rumzi. Rumzi's demeanor changed, and he suddenly became aggressive. He started threatening to kill Angus. When Angus got closer to Rumzi, he saw an oozing mass of yellow foam coming from his rucksack. There were nuts, bolts, and nails within the mass. Angus shouted at Rumzi, demanding he tell him what that was. Rumzi shouted back and said,
"This is wrong."
He pointed to Angus and said,
"You're wrong."
And then said,
"This is all wrong."
Rumzi did not see Angus, who was white, as a fellow human being. Rumzi saw him as an inferior, immoral, non-Muslim enemy. This is in stark contrast to Angus, who saw Rumzi as a fellow human who looked scared and needed help. Rumzi thought Angus and all the other commuters would burn in hell forever. Meanwhile, he believed he would be enjoying the highest level of Islam's heaven. This is the worldview Rumzi thought was real, just, moral, and perfect. During the course of the investigation, police found a suicide note signed by Rumzi Muhammad himself. The note is reportedly in Arabic. Translated to English, the note reads,
"First of all, I beg God to accept this action, and that he admits me to the highest station in paradise, for verily he grants martyrdom to whomever he wills. Secondly, to my family, don't cry for me, but instead rejoice in happiness and love. What I have done is for the sake of God, for he loves those who fight for his sake."
The 21/7 terrorists and the 7/7 terrorists were both operating from the same Al-Qaeda network in Pakistan. Just 4 years before the 21/7 plot, Al-Qaeda terrorists attacked New York by hijacking a plane and crashing into the World Trade Center. This devastating attack killed 2,996 people. Just like the 21/7 terrorists, the 9/11 terrorists also possessed letters written in Arabic that described the rewards in heaven for martyrs. This document is called The Last Night because it includes detailed instructions for how the terrorists had to prepare themselves for the attack. A copy of this 4-page letter was found in a total of 3 suitcases owned by the hijackers. The letter encourages the attackers to look forward to their upcoming death because of the rewards they are promised.
"And no paradise has been adorned for you with the sweetest things. The nymphs, wearing their finest, are calling out to you.
Come hither, followers of Allah."
Like Hamdi, Rumzi, and the 9/11 terrorists, there are some Muslims who interpret violent verses in the Quran as commands to fight against non-Muslims today. However, there are also Muslims who interpret those same verses as only directed to the Muslims at that time in 7th century Arabia. Because of this contextualized interpretation, these peaceful Muslims condemn terrorism. Unfortunately, as long as there are Muslims who continue to interpret these verses as commands to kill, the threat of attacks in the name of Islam will never end. The attacks on July 7th and 21st, 2005 have resulted in unimaginable suffering to the victims, their families, and the citizens of London. 52 civilians were killed and over 770 people were injured. In addition, the psychological damage suffered is unmeasurable. In the aftermath of the tragedy, London developed an initiative called Prevent. This is a counter-terrorism initiative aimed at preventing radicalization and protecting London. Hamdi's family and friends faced consequences far greater than a criminal record and years of their lives spent in jail. For one, because both Hamdi and Yeshimabet were jailed, their 3 children had to grow up without their parents. It is unknown what happened to them and the impact their parents' actions had on their lives. Hamdi's sister-in-law Mulumaybet was in prison from 2008 to 2013. In 2013, shortly after being released, she got a job working for a local government organization. However, in 2017, she was fired after her employer learned the full extent of her involvement in the 21/7 attack. In a statement, Mulumaybet expressed she condemns terrorism. She told her employer she was jailed, and now her career was destroyed. Her involvement in the crime damaged her professional reputation. After Mulumaybet's boyfriend's roommate, Omar El Maghboul, was released from prison, his student visa was not renewed. He was deported to Sudan. In a 2008 interview, Omar expressed his anger towards the failed bombers.
The people that do this, they say they are protecting Muslims, but that's a lie. It's destroyed my life, my entire family's life.
In 2025, 20 years after the attack, Hamdi is still in jail. He will spend a minimum of 40 years of his life in jail. Hamdi will be released when he is at least 67 years old. The question we're left with is this: is Hamdi still dreaming of virgins in paradise, or has he finally woken up?